So it has been another month, the first month of the year, and this is my first like reading wrap up on YouTube. So I'm probably not going to be very good at explaining the books that I read in January. These are some stats of what I read in January. I read a total of 12 books, I believe. A big mix of genres. Mainly I noticed that I read a lot of horror and literary fiction, which I'm not mad at. Overall, kind of like a mid-month, I had a lot of like 3-star books. It could have been because of like the mental state that I was in this month. It felt like both the longest and the shortest month that I've ever experienced. So that may have hindered some of the ratings that I gave the books that I read, but you know, we persevere. Don't forget to like this video, you know, subscribe if you feel like it. I don't know how often I'm going to be posting videos, but I really love doing them. So, you know, if you want to see when I'll post another one, you know, you can be notified of that. Yeah, let's get into the books that I read this month. So first off, we have Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. This is a romance book about this girl who is a wedding planner. She gets this really big client that can change like her whole entire career. And so she really wants to pull out all the stops, make this the best wedding that she's ever gonna plan. And so she knows that there's this florist who she used to date, who is the best at what he does. And so reluctantly she gets him on board, and you kind of just like follow their relationship trying to plan this wedding, but you also see like why they broke up in the past, because yeah, they're exes, if I didn't say that already. But yeah, they're exes. And so you see like why they broke up, how they are now, like how they're working together is kind of awkward. The guy, I really liked him. He was a relationship guy. Like he wanted to be down bad. He wanted to be cuffed. He wanted to be locked in. Her, not so much. And so that dynamic was really interesting to see. I feel as though, I mean, because we know it's a romance, like we know they end up getting together. I just think that the issues that they had of why they broke up were not resolved properly, or at least not resolved enough to warrant the ending. And so that's why I gave this, I believe, a 3.5. Like it was still fun, it was still lighthearted, got through it super quickly. Yeah, that is Forget Me Not. The next book that I read was Young Mungo by Douglas Stewart. This is a literary fiction. I gave it 4.5 stars. I really love this. I keep saying that this is for the people who are scared to read A Little Life but still want those vibes and are looking for that kind of story where you're following this young boy named Mungo, and he lives in Scotland, kind of in like a lower socioeconomic class area. And so it talks a lot about class and that sort of commentary, which I found super interesting and super important to, like, you know, open up your eyes to what's going on in the real world. We're following him in this neighborhood, and you're kind of just seeing like him grow up. Something happened. He forms this friendship with, and you know, potentially a little bit more with this other boy in the community. And in this time period, there's like a lot of homophobia, and so you see him navigating that and like discovering himself in terms of his sexuality. And that's like the past timeline. We also have like a more present or like future timeline where he's on this camping trip with 2 older guys. His mom literally just like sends him off, and you find out why she chooses to do this. And I was giddy, I was emotional, I was angry, like I was raging. All the emotions I had in this book. It was so well written, so well crafted. There are so many quotable lines about growing up and being young and finding yourself and persevering through hard times. I freaking love this. Again, if you loved A Little Life, or even if you didn't like A Little Life because it was too like heavy-handed on like the trauma and stuff, I think that this does it well, but it's not as intense. So yeah, that's Young Mungo. Give it a try. Next up, we have Loath to Love You by Ali Hazelwood. Now, this is a collection of 3 like novellas that she came out with, or she calls them like STEMinist novellas. Okay, but I'm an Ali fan. I love all of her books. The only one that I haven't read is Bride. I loved Not in Love. I think that one is like my favorite, followed by Love Theoretically. This one, I didn't love as much. I gave it a 3, and like the individual stories here, I wrote them down. So the first one, Under One Roof, I gave like a 2.75 to 3, but more on the lower end. The second one was my favorite. That I gave a 3.5, and then the last one was a 3. These were okay. Like that's the best way to put it. They were just okay. The first one in particular, I remember being like, I am not down for this. It's kind of cringe. But you know, they're fine. I think her novella that she just came out with for Christmas is a lot better. I don't know why. That wasn't even like really a novella. It's more of like a short story. So I think she's just gotten like better progressively as she's written more. And so this is one of the older ones, I believe. But you know, if you're looking for like super quick romance, something that's like not, you don't have to put thought into it. I did like how the short stories, it's following like a trio of like friends, so like each story is about one of the friends, so I thought that was really cool, and you see like how they all like tie in together and everything. Other than that, it doesn't really stick out. I don't remember much. That is Loath to Love You. The fourth book that I read this month is The Night Guest. I read it on my Kindle because I borrowed it from the library. This is a horror novella, and I was not expecting what I was getting into. But basically the premise that everyone gives is this girl, she's always waking up tired, like so exhausted, and she doesn't know why. The doctors that she's going to can't find anything wrong with her. One day she decides to like buy like fitness tracking watch and wears it to sleep, and she realizes that she walks something like 40,000 steps in the night, which is insane. So it's like no wonder she's tired. But the question is, where is she going? What is she doing? That's basically it. It's her like trying to figure, it's both her like trying to figure out what's happening, but then also her like wanting to ignore it. Like she doesn't want to know what she's doing, but she finds out. This might be a spoiler, but I think it's important because it's something that I think a lot of people, it'll make them like dislike this book. So if you don't want to hear the trigger warning, then mute right now. But if you love animals, don't read this book, especially if you love cats. It's kind of a big spoiler, but I really think that like if you cannot handle like animal abuse or anything like that, do not read this. Like I'm a cat lover, I love my cats. Reading it, I was like, oh wow, this is a lot, and I think that's why I didn't rate it as highly. What that spoiler was, it kind of decreased my rating a little bit, so I gave it 4 stars. Other than that, like I really enjoyed it. It was so creepy. I was gagged. I was like, I can't believe what we're doing right now. Like the ending was absolutely crazy. It's kind of ambiguous too, a little bit. I had so many questions at the end, like in my Notion, when I was writing my notes, I had like a list of questions that remained unanswered, but I'm okay with them being unanswered. Yeah, so if you're into a really short horror novella, that is The Night Guest. The next book that I have to share, I was really excited to read, but unfortunately I think it let me down a little bit. It is Severance by Ling Ma. Essentially what this is, it's kind of a post-apocalyptic literary fiction. It's not sci-fi, but there's like this COVID-like pandemic that has plagued the world, and this one girl, she works in an office in New York, and despite the plague, she is just keep going to work. And so you kind of follow what's happening in her life before this pandemic, and then like during it, and then like after the like full fallout. I was expecting a little bit more from this. I had heard that it talked a lot about capitalism and going to work even though it's not healthy for you, but it's like you still have this mindset where like I need to get this work done. And so it's like that hustle culture. I thought there was going to be more talk about that. I don't know, maybe I just didn't read it like critically enough, or again like the headspace that I was in at the time when I was reading it. I don't know. If it sounds interesting to you, you can give it a try. I was just a little bit let down by this one. So that is Severance. The next book that I read, it was on Kindle Unlimited, so I don't have a physical copy. It is Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay. So last year I had read The Cabin at the End of the World and I loved it. He's really well known and like really good at crafting these like really slow, eerie horror books, and then like at the end, that's when like all of the action happens. This was kind of the case for this one. So essentially it's about this man who, when he was younger, he was a part of this movie that never actually got released, and it's called Horror Movie. So he plays like a non-speaking role, and he's the only surviving like cast and main crew member, like part of this movie. Everyone else has passed away for like different reasons. People kind of say that this book is the cursed horror movie trope thing. I wasn't fully on board with it until the end. The ending of this book was 5 stars. Like, I think like the last 10, like literally the last 10 pages, I was locked in. I was like, that, yeah, it was insane. The rest of the book, it was kind of like a 3 star. book. So that's why I gave this like a 3.25. I'm very specific with my ratings, if you couldn't tell. You're following this man who used to be in this movie that was never released, only like small snippets the director had like edited and like posted online. It's become like a cult classic in like online spaces, and people want this movie to become an actual thing. And so a director approaches the only surviving cast member and is like, we want to do a reboot or a remake, whatever it's called, of this movie and actually create it. And so he gets on board. And so you see like past timelines of the past when they're filming like the original movie, and then currently when he's helping this new director kind of like revamp the movie to re-release in modern day. I really liked like the past timeline. I think it was so interesting because you see actual like screenplay of the movie. Like you're seeing the movie play out, and it's so interesting because in the beginning, in that version, it's really just like, okay, this is the movie. But then like later on, as the book keeps going, we don't know who exactly is writing it by the end. It's either like the screenplay writer or like the director, but whatever the case may be, it's like you're incorporating real thoughts, and like, yeah, you're incorporating real thoughts into the actual script of the movie. It kind of gave, you know, like in If We Were Villains, if you've read that book, where they're acting, but also like they're talking about it as if it's really happening. Like that's the vibe that I'm trying to explain here. So I thought that was super interesting. And then again, like the ending, crazy. Not everyone is gonna love this book. The fact that it's slow and like things will happen like here and there until you get to the ending, where that's where it's like, whoa, that was crazy. I can see it not being for everyone, but I would still give it a try if it sounds interesting. That is horror movie. The next book that I read, this was thankfully like the last kind of unsure book of the month. I was like, after this book, I need to read something that I know I'm gonna love. The book I'm talking about is, unfortunately, The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. This is the second book in like the Crowns of Nyaxia. I know there's like more, but in terms of like the two characters that we follow, I think this is the last book. And so I was really excited going into it because the first book, I really had fun. I love like the trial aspect. This one, I think because that like plot, we took a different direction, I didn't love it as much. And that's because in the first book, I wasn't in love with the characters. I just really loved the plot and like how things were unraveling. In this one, I gave it a 2.75. I didn't give it that rating because I didn't care about the plot, even though I kind of did. But it's the fact that it was mixed with characters that I didn't care about, that I was like, I really don't care what's happening. In a different context, like this plot is actually super interesting. Our main girl, she's a human in this world of vampires, and there's different rivaling vampire clans. She wants to become a vampire, something like that. Like basically she's like, let me be one of you, I want to be part of your world, Ariel style. And so she enters this competition that happens like, I don't know, like every 100 years or something, and then if you win that competition, you basically get a wish. And so she wants to like, you know, she wants to win and get this wish. We follow her through that in the first book. She meets a man, of course she does, because it's a romantasy. And so this is the events following what happened at the end of that book. The ending of that book gagged me. So I liked that aspect and like how that was playing out in this book. So I couldn't help, and it sucks because I can't explain it without spoiling it. There were things that happened in this book where I was like, this seems like a bit of a plot hole. I was like questioning things. I'm like, but that doesn't make sense. Like we said this thing earlier, but now we're doing this. I couldn't help that once I started noticing those things, I just kept being overly negative and critical towards this book. Like it was still fun, even though it's, I think like over 600 pages, it still went by pretty fast. Like it's super easy to read. It's not complicated. I know a lot of people love this series, but it was a bit of a miss. I don't think I'm going to be continuing on with the other books that she's released. But yeah, that is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. 8th book that I read this month. This was my first 5-star of the year. It is Disability Visibility, edited by Alice Wong, but it's a nonfiction with a collection of essays written by people with different various disabilities or like neurodevelopmental conditions, things like that. This is so important. Everyone should read this. I think that in society there is still a lot of stigma and misconceptions, like perceptions of what disability is, how people with disabilities live, and this I think would educate so many people, these people who were writing these essays, they would say something and I was like, you are so right, bestie. Like, please, I'm so happy that someone is like actually saying this, and it was being put in a book. Alice Wong, the person who like edited all of this together, these are all speeches, essays, what have you, from this project called Disability Visibility that they created. And so this is just like a collection of all of those submissions. It wasn't even just like education. It also talked about like a lot of inner turmoil and like inner ableism that a lot of people with disabilities have. So like, for example, finding a cure for certain things. For some communities, it's like, yes, I want to find a cure, but I can't live my life in search of a cure. I have to live my life how it is now. And so that inner battle of like wanting to find a cure, but then also wanting to just accept like how life is and just live your life. I thought it was so interesting, and hearing like firsthand accounts is always so important. So I think if you're in the market for like a nonfiction, Disability Visibility, please read it. Another horror novella that I borrowed from the library, we have Bloom by Delilah S. of Dawson. This was so good. I gave it a 4.25, I believe, or maybe even a 4.5 if I keep thinking about it. We have this girl, she just got dumped. She, you know, feeling down. She goes to this farmer's market one day and she sees this girl there and she becomes so infatuated with her. She develops a little crush on this girl. She makes like soaps, cupcakes, whatever, at this farmer's market. And so she, you know, she puts on the riz. She tries to get with this girl. It happens, but this girl, it may not be all that she seems. And it quickly spirals into a mess. I will say right now, this is gory. It is graphic. It is mind-bending. Any sort of praise that you've heard about this book, believe it. I think at the ending, I was questioning on if Miss Girl made the right choice. Like, I was like, girl, like, why bother? And if you read it, you know what, I hope you know what I mean. But it was like, when you find yourself in one situation, I would have just been like, okay, let it be. But no, we humans love to persevere. That's all I'm gonna say about this book. If you love horror, if you're okay with gore, just read it. That is Bloom. Next book, we have Blue Sisters by Coco Mellors. I have been wanting to read this book ever since it came out, and I finally did, and I'm so happy that I loved it. I rated this 4.5 stars, and you're basically following these 3 different sisters. They're all completely different. Their 4th sister just passed away like a year ago. So in a year, you're seeing them grieve where they are, what they were doing while she was still alive, and how her death has impacted all 3 of them. I think if you are a sibling, especially if you have a sister, you need to read this. I tabbed it. I don't know if you can tell. It talks about grief and sisterhood and friendships and relationships and how you can perceive someone as being perfect, but they're not perfect, and everyone is silently struggling. Oh, it was so good. There were so many things that I absolutely loved. These characters also, like, they're not totally likable, and I think that Coco Mellors did that so well. It's so easy to create like these perfect characters, but no, these are all so realistically flawed. You can see yourself in every single person, which I thought is really impressive to be able to write something like that. I really don't have anything else negative to say. The only reason it wasn't like a total 5, I don't know, there was just, I didn't get that 5-star feeling. You know, like when you read a book and you're like, okay, this is like a favorite of all time. I didn't get that, but this is so good. Highly recommend Blue Sisters. Second to last book that I read this month was Confessions by Kane Minato. So I've been wanting to read this for so long, and I am so glad I did. I gave it 4 stars. It's kind of like a mystery thriller. The way that I would describe this, just diabolical. Diabolical is the best word that I can use to describe this book. There's kind of like 4 different perspectives of this situation that happened. Basically, we have this middle school teacher whose daughter died, and she knows that 2 of the students in her class are responsible for killing her daughter. And so, you know, she's out to get them. She's out for revenge, vigilante kind of vibe. The ending of each of the perspectives has like sort of a twist. I was gagged at every single one. It was so strange because the beginning of all of these like chapters, I guess we can call them, is they're very slow, and I found myself being like, okay, like, can we get to the point? But then towards the end, like the last quarter of each chapter, everything kind of like comes together, and by the end of it I was like, okay, that was so good. You are following the same situation from like different perspectives, and some of the stories kind of overlap. The parts that did overlap, I was getting a bit bored, but the new stuff that you find out and like seeing other people's perspectives and views on certain things was so fascinating. If you love uncovering people's secrets and you want to feel a little bit like on edge, I would give Confessions a try. The last book that I read in January, and probably my favorite like fiction read of the month, is 10 Minutes and 38 Seconds in This Strange World by litfic. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I could have looked it up before, I forgot. You're following this adult worker, if you know what I mean, and she gets murdered, left in a dumpster, by a dumpster or something like that. And the first half of this book is you're following the 10 minutes and 38 seconds that her brain is still active until she completely dies. And in this time, you're seeing her reflecting back on her past life, like literally from when she was born to how she ended up where she was. That whole part of the story, absolutely heartbreaking, gut-wrenching. Like, I was so locked in. I loved this character so much. I was so sad for her. I was tearing up. While you're learning about her story, you also learn about her friends. I think they're called like the Five, or like there are 5 of her friends, and you see like little vignettes about their life, kind of what makes them, how they got to their, like how they are presently in this book. So then after like the 10 minutes 38 seconds, then you follow them trying to get justice for her, trying to give her the respect of a burial that she deserves, because where she lives, because of the profession that she was in, no one really respects her. And she was like, no, they're like, the friends are like, no, this was our friend, we need to make sure that she is being respected, and we just need to take care of her even after she's dead, because of the impact that she had in their lives, and like how like they're just all of their relationships as a group and then individual relationships. Ew. It was so good. If you love reading about like friendship, acceptance, found family, like hardships, overcoming those hardships, perseverance, resilience, please read this. It was so good. If I didn't say, I give it a 4.75. It was almost a 5. If I keep thinking about it for as long as I do, it's probably just gonna be a 5 anyways. But like objectively, this is a 5-star book. The writing is fantastic. The prose is like so beautiful. Like, this author can write. Her pen is crazy. That is 10 minutes and 38 seconds in This Strange World. We ended off the month so strong, and I'm glad to say that I have been starting February off pretty strong. I've had a 5-star already. I'm so excited. I was so happy when I finished that book. I was like, this was my first 5-star in February. Oh, I was so happy. Yeah, that is everything that I read in the month of January. If you're watching this and you made it to the end, tell me what you read in January. Did you read any of the books that I read? Did you like them? Do you disagree with me? Let me know if you have any recommendations based on what I liked and didn't like. Also let me know. Like this video, subscribe maybe, because I don't know how consistent I'm gonna be. This is just like whenever I feel like it. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you soon.